What if the answer to a 32-year-old mystery was hiding in plain sight, buried beneath hundreds of nostalgic YouTube comments on a grainy home video from 1992? Emily Carter vanished without a trace on a Friday night in Portland, Oregon. No body. No suspects. No witnesses who saw anything unusual. Just a young woman who walked out of a bar and dissolved into the rain-soaked streets like a ghost. For 3 decades, her family lived with unanswered questions. Detectives moved on to other cases. The file grew cold, gathering dust in a basement archive. Then, in 2024, someone left a comment on a random YouTube video. 11 words that would crack open everything. I remember that night. She called me before she disappeared. What happened next would prove that sometimes the smallest digital footprint can echo louder than decades of silence. Before we dive into this incredible story, if you're fascinated by cold cases and the unexpected ways technology helps solve them, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. This case shows how citizen detectives and digital breadcrumbs can accomplish what seemed impossible. Now, let's go back to where it all began, a rainy night in Portland, 1992. Chapter 1, The Last Night Anyone Saw Emily Carter. The rain came down in sheets that Friday night, October 16, 1992. The kind of Portland rain that turns sidewalks into mirrors and makes you question every decision that brought you outside. Inside the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar on Southeast Morrison Street, the crowd didn't care about the weather. It was the weekend, and the place was packed. Emily Carter sat at the bar, nursing a vodka cranberry and laughing with friends. At 23, she was everything the 90s promised young people they could be: independent, ambitious, alive with possibility. She'd moved to Portland 6 months earlier from Sacramento, chasing a job at a graphic design firm and the promise of a city that felt like it belonged to artists and dreamers. Her friends that night, Rachel Dominguez and Jennifer Park, would later tell police that Emily seemed completely normal. Happy, even. She just landed a freelance project with a local record label and couldn't stop talking about it. Around 11:30 p.m., she announced she was heading home. She had an early morning meeting and didn't want to be hungover. "Are you sure you don't want us to walk with you?" Rachel asked, concerned about Emily making the 15-minute walk to her apartment alone. Emily waved her off. "I've done it 100 times. I'll be fine." Those were the last words her friends ever heard her speak. She pulled on her denim jacket, the one with the Nirvana patch her brother had given her, grabbed her purse, and walked out into the rain. A few people at the bar noticed her leave. The bartender, Marcus Webb, remembered because she'd left a generous tip. A guy playing pool looked up when the door opened, letting in a blast of cold air. Then she was gone. Emily never made it home that night. Her roommate, Sarah Chen, woke up the next morning to find Emily's bed untouched, her breakfast dishes from the previous day still in the sink. Sarah initially wasn't worried. Emily sometimes stayed over at her boyfriend's place. But when Emily missed her Saturday afternoon shift at a local bookstore where she worked part-time, Sarah knew something was wrong. By Sunday evening, Emily's parents received the call every parent dreads. Their daughter was missing. The Portland Police Bureau opened a missing persons investigation immediately. Detectives canvassed the route from the Rusty Anchor to Emily's apartment, interviewed everyone who'd been at the bar that night, and checked hospitals, shelters, and bus stations. They found nothing. No witnesses. No signs of struggle. No body. Emily Carter had simply vanished into the October rain, leaving behind only questions and the hollow ache of absence. Her case would haunt Portland for decades, another unsolved mystery in a city that collected them like rain collects in gutters. But 32 years later, a forgotten piece of technology and an anonymous internet comment would finally give Emily's silence a voice. Chapter 2: The Cold Case That Haunted a City. Detective Sarah Morrison inherited Emily Carter's case file in 2008, 16 years after the disappearance. By then, it had passed through 4 different investigators, each one hitting the same dead ends, each one eventually moving on to cases with more promising leads. Sarah was different. She'd grown up in Portland, was roughly Emily's age when the disappearance happened, and had actually been to the Rusty Anchor a few times herself in the early 90s. Reading through the file, she felt a connection to this young woman whose life had been interrupted mid-sentence. The original investigation had been thorough, Sarah had to admit. Lead detective Frank Kowalski had done everything by the book. He'd interviewed over 60 people, everyone at the bar that night, Emily's coworkers, her family, her ex-boyfriend from Sacramento, even the postal worker who delivered mail to her apartment building. The evidence was frustratingly sparse. Emily's apartment showed no signs of forced entry or struggle. Her car was parked in its usual spot. Her bank account showed no unusual activity after October 16, no ATM withdrawals, no credit card purchases. It was as if she'd stepped off the edge of the world. Detective Kowalski had pursued several theories. The ex-boyfriend in Sacramento had a solid alibi. He was at his sister's wedding in San Diego with 200 witnesses. A man who'd asked Emily for her phone number at the bar 2 weeks before her disappearance was interviewed extensively but cleared. He'd been at home with his wife that night. There was one detail that had always bothered investigators, though it led nowhere. A bartender at a different establishment, 3 blocks from the Rusty Anchor, mentioned seeing a young woman matching Emily's description standing at the pay phone outside his bar around midnight. He couldn't be certain it was her. The rain and distance made it difficult to see clearly, but the timing and location fit. That pay phone became a minor focus of the investigation. Phone records were pulled, but the technology of 1992 made it impossible to trace calls made from public phones unless you knew exactly when they were placed and had a warrant. The phone company's records from that night showed dozens of calls. Without knowing which call might have been Emily's, they were useless. By 1995, the case had gone cold. Emily's parents, David and Linda Carter, never stopped hoping, never stopped calling the police department for updates, but the reality was cruel and simple. Without a body, without witnesses, without any evidence of foul play, there was nowhere left to look. The years passed. Technology advanced. The internet emerged and transformed how people communicated, how they remembered, and how they shared memories. MySpace came and went. Facebook connected old friends. YouTube became a repository for everything from cat videos to history lessons. And somewhere in that digital explosion, a piece of 1992 survived, waiting to be discovered. Chapter 3: The Video That Changed Everything. Channel_nostalgia_digs was the kind of YouTube channel that lived in the internet's quieter corners. Run by a Portland native named Marcus Chen, no relation to Emily's former roommate, the channel specialized in digitizing old VHS tapes and home videos from the 80s and 90s. Marcus would find them at estate sales, thrift stores, and storage unit auctions, then upload them for others to enjoy. It's like time travel, Marcus explained in his channel's About section. These moments were precious to someone once. They deserve to be remembered. Most of his videos got a few hundred views at most. People would comment with things like, "This is exactly how I remember the 90s, or I had that same couch." It was pure nostalgia, harmless and gentle. On March 3, 2024, Marcus uploaded a video titled Portland Bar Scene 1992 Local Band Performance at the Rusty Anchor. He'd found the tape at an estate sale in Gresham, mixed in with someone's collection of recorded TV shows and birthday parties. The tape wasn't labeled, so Marcus had no idea what was on it until he played it. The footage was grainy, shot on someone's camcorder, probably one of those heavy shoulder-mounted models that were popular before everything got smaller. The video showed a local band, the Velvet Ghosts, according to a handwritten set list visible in one frame, playing covers and original songs to a packed Friday night crowd. The person filming panned across the audience occasionally, capturing the 90s in all its glory: flannel shirts, high-waisted jeans, cigarettes indoors, hair gel that defied gravity. The video quality was poor, the sound was worse, but it was authentic. Real. Marcus uploaded it without much fanfare. Just another slice of Portland history preserved. For 3 months, the video did what Marcus's videos usually did: it accumulated a few hundred views, mostly from people in Portland who enjoyed the nostalgia hit. Comments came in slowly. Someone recognized the band's lead singer. Another person claimed they'd been at the Rusty Anchor that night but couldn't remember which night specifically. They'd all blurred together. Then, on June 15, 2024, at 2:47 a.m., username anonymouswitness_92 left a comment that would change everything. I remember that night. October 16, 1992. The girl dancing in the background at 3:47, Emily Carter. She called me before she disappeared. Said someone was following her. I've never forgotten that call. The comment sat there for 6 hours before anyone noticed it. Then, a true crime enthusiast from Beaverton named Jessica Torres was doing what she did most Saturday mornings, falling down YouTube rabbit holes about Portland history. She stumbled onto Marcus's video, started reading comments, and stopped cold when she saw it. Jessica knew Emily Carter's case. She'd read about it on several true crime forums and had even visited a memorial website Emily's family maintained. This comment, if it was real, was potentially the biggest break in the case in over 3 decades. Jessica immediately took screenshots and started a thread on r/unresolved mysteries. Within hours, thousands of people were discussing it. Was it real? Was it a hoax? Someone found Emily in the background of the video at the 3:47 mark, just as the comment indicated. It was hard to be certain from the grainy footage, but the woman wore a denim jacket and had Emily's distinctive dark, curly hair. Chapter 4: The Internet Detectives Go to Work. The Reddit thread exploded overnight. What started as Jessica Torres's post about a mysterious YouTube comment became a full-scale citizen investigation within 24 hours. This was the internet at both its best and most chaotic. Thousands of people, most well-intentioned, all convinced they could help solve a 32-year-old mystery. User profiles were analyzed. Anonymous_witness_92 had created their YouTube account in 2019 but had never commented on anything before this video. Their channel had no uploads, no subscriptions listed publicly, no profile picture. The account was a ghost. True crime podcasters jumped on the story. Within a week, 3 different shows had dedicated episodes to the YouTube comment. The Trail Went Cold podcast interviewed Emily's brother, now 47, and living in Seattle. He broke down on air when asked about the comment. If someone really spoke to Emily that night, if she told them she was being followed, why didn't they come forward in 1992? Why wait 32 years? His voice cracked with 3 decades of grief and frustration. The question everyone asked was simple: why now? Marcus Chen, the channel owner, was overwhelmed. His quiet nostalgia project had become the center of national attention. Local news stations interviewed him. His video views jumped from 800 to over 2 million in a matter of days. He provided YouTube with a request to identify anonymous witness_92, but YouTube's privacy policies meant they couldn't share user information without law enforcement involvement. That's when Detective Sarah Morrison's phone rang. She'd retired from the Portland Police Bureau in 2019, but she'd never stopped thinking about Emily Carter. Cold cases had a way of staying with you, becoming permanent residents in your head. When a former colleague called to tell her about the YouTube comment, Sarah was at her kitchen table in Hillsborough, drinking coffee and doing a crossword puzzle. She was back at the precinct within an hour. The Portland Police Bureau's Cold Case Unit officially reopened Emily Carter's investigation on June 22, 2024. Detective James Park, no relation to Emily's friend Jennifer, was assigned as lead investigator. His first move was to subpoena YouTube for information about anonymous witness _92. While they waited for the legal process to unfold, internet detectives continued their work. Someone discovered that the video's timestamp, if accurate, placed the recording at approximately 11:15 p.m. on October 16, 1992, about 15 minutes before Emily told her friends she was leaving. A digital forensics enthusiast named Tyler Hammond downloaded the video and used modern enhancement software to improve the image quality. The results were remarkable. The woman at 347 was almost certainly Emily Carter. You could see the Nirvana patch on her jacket clearly in the enhanced version. More than that, Tyler's frame-by-frame analysis showed Emily looking toward the door multiple times, as if checking something or watching someone. Another Reddit user, a former telephone company employee, posted detailed information about how pay phone systems worked in 1992. If Emily had made a call from a public phone, there might be records, if anyone knew where to look and if those records hadn't been destroyed in the decades since. The bartender who'd mentioned seeing a woman at a payphone 3 blocks away in 1992, Marcus Webb, now 63 and retired, was tracked down by journalists. He agreed to an interview and confirmed his original statement. "I've thought about that night so many times over the years," Webb said. "When Emily's case was all over the news, I kept wondering if that was her I'd seen. But I could never be sure, and I didn't want to send the police on a wild goose chase based on a glimpse through rain and darkness. Everything was pointing toward one conclusion: Emily Carter had made a phone call the night she disappeared. And now, somehow, the person she'd called was finally speaking up. But why? And what had taken them so long?" Chapter 5: The Phone Call That Never Existed. YouTube finally responded to the police subpoena on July 8, 2024. The results were both helpful and frustrating in equal measure. Anonymous witness _92's account was registered to an email address, witness1992truth@protonmail.com. ProtonMail, being an encrypted email service based in Switzerland, meant another subpoena, another waiting period, another legal hurdle. The IP address associated with the account's creation traced to a public library in Beaverton, Oregon, the same city where Jessica Torres, the woman who'd first publicized the comment, lived. Detective James Park found that detail interesting but not necessarily suspicious. Beaverton was a Portland suburb with over 100,000 residents. It could be coincidence. The team decided to take a different approach. They went public with an appeal. On July 12, the Portland Police Bureau held a press conference. Emily's parents, now in their 70s, sat beside Detective Park as he addressed the cameras. "We know someone out there has information about Emily Carter's last hours," Park said. "If you are the person who spoke with Emily on October 16, 1992, we need you to come forward. You are not in trouble. You are not a suspect. But you may hold the key to giving this family the answers they've waited 32 years to hear." Linda Carter, Emily's mother, spoke through tears. "Please. If you know anything, if Emily called you that night, we just want to know what happened to our daughter. We just want to bring her home. The press conference was broadcast nationally. It was covered by CNN, shared millions of times on social media, and discussed on every major true crime platform. 3 days later, on July 15 at 7:34 p.m., the Proton Mail account sent an email directly to the Portland Police Bureau's tip line. The email was brief. "I want to help, but I'm afraid. What Emily told me that night, it involves people who might still be dangerous. I need protection before I can say more. I will provide proof that the call happened. Give me a way to communicate safely." Detective Park worked with the FBI to set up a secure communication channel. Within 24 hours, they had a response. This time, the message included an attachment, a photograph of a small leather address book, open to a page with Emily Carter's name and a phone number written in blue ink. "This was Emily's address book," the message read. "She left it in my car 2 weeks before she disappeared. I should have returned it, but I forgot. The night she vanished, she called me from a pay phone. She didn't have any numbers memorized except mine. She was panicked. She said someone had been following her since she left the bar. She asked if I could come pick her up." The message continued, "I told her to go back inside the bar, that I'd be there in 15 minutes. But when I arrived, she was gone. I waited for an hour. I checked inside, her friend said she'd already left. I drove around the neighborhood but couldn't find her. I thought maybe she'd gotten a cab or found another ride. When I heard she was missing the next day, I was terrified. I was young and stupid and scared. I convinced myself the call wasn't important, that what she'd told me wouldn't help. I was wrong, and I've regretted it every day since." The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigation. Detective Park immediately focused on verifying the address book's authenticity. Emily's parents confirmed that she did keep a small leather address book and that it had never been found among her belongings. But who was this person? And why were they still afraid after 32 years? Chapter 6, The Security Tape Nobody Knew Existed. The anonymous witness, whom police and media had started calling the caller, agreed to a face-to-face meeting on July 22, 2024. The meeting took place in a secure room at the Portland FBI field office with Detective Park, an FBI agent, Emily's parents, watching via video link from another room at their request, and a protection detail. The person who walked into that room was not who anyone expected. Her name was Diane Foster. She was 55 years old, a software engineer who'd lived in Portland her entire life. In 1992, she'd been a 23-year-old college dropout working as a waitress and trying to figure out her life. She'd met Emily Carter at a LGBTQ community center in September 1992, and they'd formed a fast friendship. "Emily was one of the first people who knew I was gay," Diane explained, her hands shaking as she spoke. "In 1992, that wasn't something you advertised freely. We weren't dating or anything like that. Emily was straight, but we were close friends. She was kind and open-minded in a way that felt rare back then." Diane confirmed that Emily had left her address book in Diane's car after they'd gone to a concert together. She'd meant to return it but kept forgetting. "On October 16, around midnight, my phone rang," Diane continued. "It was Emily. She was at a payphone, and she sounded terrified. She said a man had been following her since she left the Rusty Anchor. She tried to lose him by taking side streets, but he was still there. She could hear his footsteps behind her. Why didn't you come forward?" Detective Park asked, though his tone was gentle, not accusatory. Diane's eyes filled with tears. "Because the next day, after I heard Emily was missing, I got a phone call. A man's voice. He said if I told anyone about Emily's call to me, if I mentioned to police that she'd said someone was following her, he would make sure everyone knew about me. About who I really was. In 1992, being openly gay could cost you your job, your family, your safety. Diane had been living with her conservative parents, working minimum wage jobs, barely surviving. The threat was real and terrifying. He knew where I worked. He knew where I lived. He told me that Emily had made up the story about being followed because she was drunk and paranoid. He said if I stayed quiet, everything would be fine. That Emily would probably turn up somewhere with a hangover and a story. But she didn't, Diane whispered. And I've had to live with that silence for 32 years. I've had to live knowing that I might have been able to save her if I'd just been braver. Detective Park immediately asked the crucial question, "Did you recognize the voice of the man who threatened you?" Diane shook her head. Not at the time. But I've thought about it for 32 years. There was something familiar about it, like maybe I'd heard it before, but I couldn't place it. The team now had confirmation of the phone call and a potential suspect, a man who'd known about Emily's call to Diane quickly enough to threaten her the very next day. That suggested someone close to the situation. Someone who might have been at the bar that night. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Diane mentioned that when she'd driven to the Rusty Anchor to pick up Emily after the phone call, she'd parked near a different bar called the Dockside Tavern, 3 blocks away. There was a security camera on the building, she said. I remember because the red light was blinking, and I thought it might have caught me driving past. At the time, I was afraid that would somehow implicate me. Now, I wonder if it might have caught something else. Detective Park felt a chill run down his spine. The Dockside Tavern. The same bar where Marcus Webb, the bartender, had seen a woman at the payphone. Chapter 7, The Echo of a Last Call. The Dockside Tavern had closed in 2003, demolished to make way for a condo development. But Detective Park tracked down the former owner, Robert Chen, again, no relation to any other Chens in this story, who was now 78 and living in a retirement community in Lake Oswego. Security footage from 1992? Robert laughed. Son, I barely remember what I had for breakfast yesterday. But Park pressed. Did any tapes survive? Were they stored anywhere? Robert thought for a long moment. You know, I kept everything when we closed. My daughter has it all in her garage in Tigard. Business records, old menus, probably some other junk. I don't know if security tapes would still be there after 20 years, but you're welcome to look. 2 days later, Detective Park and a team of investigators were in a garage in Tigard, surrounded by boxes that smelled like mildew and thyme. They found tax documents, employee schedules, vendor invoices, and dozens of VHS tapes labeled with dates. And there, in a cardboard box marked Security, 1992, they found it, October 16th. The tape was rushed to a digital forensics lab. The technology had degraded significantly, but specialists were able to recover most of the footage. What they saw made everything fall into place. At 11:52 p.m., Emily Carter appeared on camera. She was at the payphone, her back to the camera, making a call. The footage was grainy but unmistakable, the denim jacket, the dark curly hair, the body language of someone frightened and trying to hide it. At 11:58 p.m., 6 minutes later, a man appeared in the frame. He approached Emily from behind, slowly, deliberately. When Emily hung up the phone and turned around, she visibly startled. The man spoke to her, the security camera had no audio, so the conversation was lost to history, and Emily's body language changed. She seemed to relax slightly, then nodded. They walked out of frame together, heading north on Morrison Street. The forensics team enhanced the footage as much as possible. The man was tall, wearing a dark jacket and baseball cap. His face was partially visible in two frames. They ran the images through facial recognition software, comparing them to everyone who'd been interviewed in the original investigation. No matches. They widened the search to arrest records, driver's licenses, any database they could access. Finally, on August 3, 2024, they got a hit. The man in the video was Curtis Hammond. In 1992, he'd been a 32-year-old regular at the Rusty Anchor. He'd been interviewed by police, briefly, as part of the general canvassing. He'd said he'd been at the bar that night but had left around 10 p.m. and gone home. No one had thought to question it further. Curtis Hammond died in 2019 from a heart attack. He'd never been arrested, never been in serious trouble with the law. He'd worked as a mechanic, married, divorced, lived a seemingly ordinary life in Portland until his death. But when investigators dug deeper, they found something interesting. In 2007, Hammond had sold a small property he owned near the Columbia River Gorge, 20 acres of forested land his father had left him. The new owners had never developed it, and the property had changed hands twice more since then. On August 10, 2024, a team of forensic investigators and cadaver dogs arrived at those 20 acres. They found Emily Carter on the third day of searching, buried 6 feet deep beneath what had once been a clearing but was now overgrown forest. Her denim jacket, remarkably preserved by the soil conditions, still had the Nirvana patch her brother had given her. The medical examiner determined that Emily had been strangled shortly after her disappearance. She'd been dead within hours of making that last phone call to Diane Foster. The full story would never be known. Curtis Hammond took his secrets to the grave 5 years before Emily's body was found. But investigators pieced together a likely scenario. Hammond had been obsessed with Emily, had followed her from the bar, had somehow convinced her he was safe enough to accept help from. Perhaps he'd claimed to be friends with someone she knew. Perhaps he'd offered her a ride. However it happened, Emily had trusted him just enough, for just long enough. The phone call to Diane had been Emily's attempt to escape. The threat to Diane the next day had been Hammond's attempt to cover his tracks. And 32 years later, a grainy home video on YouTube and one woman's decision to finally speak the truth had brought Emily home. Epilogue. On September 15, 2024, Emily Carter was finally laid to rest in Portland's Riverview Cemetery, with a view of the city she'd loved and had so little time to explore. Hundreds of people attended, family, friends from 3 decades ago, investigators who'd worked her case, and strangers who'd followed her story and felt connected to her fight for justice. Diane Foster stood at the back of the ceremony, finally free from the secret she'd carried for most of her life. Emily's mother embraced her afterward. "Thank you for being brave," Linda Carter whispered. "Thank you for finally letting my daughter speak." Marcus Chen's YouTube video remains online, now with millions of views and thousands of comments. It's become a memorial of sorts, a place where people reflect on justice delayed but not denied, on the power of preserved memories, and on the unexpected ways the truth finds its way into the light. The cold case was solved not by advanced forensics alone, not by traditional detective work alone, but by a combination of digital preservation, citizen engagement, and one person's decision that 32 years of silence was finally enough. Emily Carter's last call had echoed across 3 decades, through phone lines and fiber optics, through VHS tapes and digital uploads, through guilt and fear and finally, into the truth. Sometimes justice is patient. Sometimes it waits for technology to catch up, for shame to fade, for the internet to connect dots that were separated by decades and distance. Sometimes all it takes is one comment on one video to change everything. Emily Carter can rest now. And somewhere, in the digital archive of our collective memory, her voice still speaks, a reminder that no story is truly over until the truth is told. The end. If you found this story compelling, please subscribe for more deep dives into cold cases and the unexpected ways they get solved. And remember, if you have information about any unsolved case, it's never too late to speak up. Justice might be waiting for your voice.